Hey everybody, welcome to homework 1.14. I'm going to go through the homework pretty quickly today, and then I'm going to go back and show you some of the problems in the classwork in case you needed help with any of those. Alright, so today we are solving systems of equations through elimination, which you all discovered is a little bit faster, a little bit more fun. So in our first few problems, it's a little bit more obvious to spot. Here we have the same coefficient, but with the opposite sign. So a negative 4x and a positive 4x we know will equal 0. So this works out nicely for me to combine the rest of them. 8y and negative 2y give me 6y. And then negative 12 and negative 24 give me negative 36. I can divide both sides by 6, and I'm going to get y equals negative 6. Now I can go back and plug that in to solve for x. So if we have negative 4x minus 2 times negative 6 equals negative 12, I'm going to do negative 4x, negative 2 times negative 6 is positive 12, equals negative 12. I'm going to subtract 12 from both sides. We'll get negative 4x equals negative 24, x equals 6. And I can plug those back in and say I get negative 24 plus 12, that gives me negative 12. I know that works out. I get 24 plus negative 48, that gives me negative 24, so we know that this is our answer, so 6 comma negative 6. Alright, number 2, I'm going to model with this one again. Actually, I'm going to skip number 2 because number 2 is very similar. You have coefficients with opposite sign in the x's. Let's take a look at number 3. Number 3, in this case, our coefficient is the same for y, but it is opposite signs, so those can cancel out, and we end up with 3x equals 30. Divide both sides by 3. X equals 10, and then you can plug that back in. For x, the top equation's a little simpler, so if we do 10 minus y equals 11, subtract 10 on both sides, we'll get negative y equals 1. If we divide both sides by negative 1 or times both sides by negative 1, we'll get y equals negative 1. So we have 10 comma negative 1 as our answer here. All right, in number 4, I'm just going to go ahead and tell you, if you look at opposite sign for the same coefficient, that's going to go ahead and cancel out nicely. So you can do number 2 and 4 on your own. I'm going to model number 5, because number 5, we have something with the same coefficient but not the opposite sign. So I want one of these to have the opposite sign. So I'm going to go ahead and multiply the first one by negative 1 and then rewrite it underneath here, just because that'll be easier to line them up. So negative 1 times negative 2 gives me positive 2x. Negative 1 times negative 9 gives me positive 9y equals, and then remember I have to multiply the whole thing, so negative 1 times negative 25 is positive 25. That multiplying through the entire equation is really important because otherwise you leave it unbalanced. So negative 4x and 2x becomes negative 2x. These cancel out now because they have the opposite sign, but they have the same coefficient, equals negative 23 and 25 is going to be positive 2. Divide both sides by negative 2. We get x equals negative 1. And now you can plug that back in for y, or for x to solve for y. So negative 2 times negative 1 minus 9y equals negative 25. 2 minus 9y equals negative 25. I'm going to subtract 2 from both sides. We'll get negative 9y equals negative 27. Divide both sides by negative 9. Y equals 3. Okay? So modeling number 5 for you, that's what you're going to get for 5. If you look at 6, we have a similar situation in which these have the same coefficient but not opposite signs. So one of them you need to multiply by negative 1. I like to multiply the top one by negative 1 and then just rewrite it underneath the next one because I find that easy to do. But you can do it however you want to. If you prefer to multiply by negative 1 on the bottom first, you can do that and then combine them. You just have to make sure you keep track of which one you did it to so that you're combining the right equations. I'm going to model one more with number 7, and then I'm going to show you 8, 9, 10, and 11, 9, 10, 11, and 12, because those are a little bit different, and so I'm going to give you a little bit of help on those. So for number 7, we have the same coefficient of negative 6 for our x, but we want it to have the opposite sign, so I'm going to multiply by negative 1 and rewrite it below. Negative 1 times negative 6x is positive 6x. Negative 1 times 6y is negative 6y. And then negative 1 times 6 is negative 6. This cancels out. We get negative 3y equals negative 18. Y equals 6. And then I can plug that in. Negative 6x plus 36 equals 6. Subtract 36 from both sides. We get negative 6x equals negative 30. Divide both sides by negative 6. X equals 5. So we have 5 comma 6 as our answer. And I can test that out. Negative 30 plus 36 gives me positive 6, and negative 30 plus 18 gives me negative 12. Okay, so numbers 9, 10, 11, 12 are a little bit different because here we don't have the same coefficient of opposite signs. So we have opposite signs for y. So I'm going to use this and say, well, how would I get y to have the same coefficient? What can I multiply by? I can multiply this whole thing by 7. And that'll give me 35x plus 7y equals 63. What's nice about this now is that I have this negative 7y plus 7y, and that can cancel out. So 10x and 35x is going to give me 45x equals 63, and negative 18 are also going to give me 45. Divide both sides by 45. X equals 1. And then you can plug that back in. 5 times 1 plus y equals 9. 5 plus y equals 9. Y then has to equal 4. So if you have a situation in which the coefficient is not, you don't have the same coefficient for one of your variables, and you have to look at the sign, right? You can pick which one's going to be the best to multiply by. So let me show you another example with 10. So number 10, neither of them have the same coefficient, but we do have opposite signs for both this one and this one. So what you multiply by for this one doesn't really matter. I would suggest in this case that we multiply the bottom equation by 3. And the reason is then this is going to make it 3x minus 9y equals negative 6. And if I combine that with this one, negative 4x plus 9y equals 9, then this cancels out. We have left with a negative x equals 3. Divide both sides by negative 1, and x will give me negative 3. Then I can plug that in. Negative 3 minus 3y equals negative 6. Add 3 to both sides. We get negative 3y equals negative 3. Y then equals 1. Okay, so for numbers 11 and 12, I want you to work those out yourself, but I'm going to tell you what I would recommend you do. So for number 11, let me just erase a little of this so you can see. And all right, so number 11, what I would recommend is these are the easiest to get create the same coefficient, because if I multiply by 3, I'll get 9. But I want to have the opposite signs, and this is a negative. So I'm going to multiply the whole thing by negative 3, because that'll give me a positive 9x, and then I can cancel out with the negative 9x in the other equation. The key here is this is distributive property, so you have to remember to multiply the entire equation by negative 3. Okay, so that's my helpful hint for number 11. For number 12, I would recommend that you multiply, again, the top by negative 3. Because when we multiply through, we'll get a negative 3y, which will cancel out this positive 3y. Again, the big point here is that you need to multiply the entire thing by that negative 3. Okay. Number 1 says, which equation is the result of adding these two equations? So this is if we were to just straight up add these, what would we get? So negative 2x and 3x is x, 4y minus 10y is negative 6y, and then 17 minus 3 is 14. So I'm looking at my answer options, and C is the best answer option. Which equation is the result of subtracting the second equation from the first? So if I'm subtracting the second equation from the first, I'm multiplying a negative through the entire thing. And so I end up with 4x minus 6y equals 13. Negative times a negative becomes 5, positive 5, minus 2y equals negative 5. Now I can combine 9x minus 8y equals 8. All right, and so that is letter D. Number 3 says solve this system of equations without graphing. Well, immediately I see I have a coefficient of 2 and negative 2 here, and they're opposite, so they will cancel out. We'll get 10x equals 10, carry the 1, 70, x equals 7. Then I'm going to go back. 5 times 7 plus 2y equals 29. 35 plus 2y equals 29. Subtract 35 from both sides. We get 2y equals negative 6. Y then will equal negative 3. Okay? All right. Number 4 says, would you use subtraction or addition to solve this system? So notice here that 6x and negative 6x are already opposite, which means we wouldn't need to subtract anything, because if we simply combine these and add them together, this is going to cancel out. So we would use addition because you finish that sentence and explain why, and then you need to finish solving it. All right, so go ahead, and after you cancel out those 6x and minus 6x, go ahead, combine these, and solve for y. Then once you have y, you can use either equation to solve for x. Number 5 is a review. It says Elena and Karen are playing a board game. After one round, Elena says, you earned so many more points than I did. If you earned 5 more points, your score would be twice mine. Karen says, oh, I don't think I did that much better. I only scored 9 points higher than you did. Write a system of equations to represent each student's comment. Be sure to specify what your variables represent. If both students were correct, how many points did each student score? Show your reasoning. All right, so Elena says, you earned so many points, so many more points than I did. If you earned 5 more points, your score would be twice mine. So that's saying that 2 times Elena's score would be whatever Kieran earned plus 5. And then Kieran says, oh, I don't think I did that much better. I only scored 9 points higher than you did. So Kieran says that, her score is Elena's score plus 9. Okay, now, so those are our systems of equations. It says, let's see if we can solve this. So we have what k equals, which is e plus 9. So let's go ahead and say 2e equals, we're going to replace this k, e plus 9 plus 5. So now I can go ahead and combine like terms. 2e equals e plus 14. I'm going to subtract e from this side to get it to the other side, so we just are left with e equals 14. This would mean that Elena's score is 14, and if I were to plug that into this score, for example, here, I would get 14 plus 9, which gives me 23. So Elena's would be 14, and Kieran's would be 23. Okay, so this is doing the same thing you did, but with a particular situation and writing an equation for them. All right, let's go back to the classwork. As I'm doing that, your code word for today will be Jenga. That's your code word for today, Jenga. Let's look at classwork problems 2 and 3. So for question 2, we have q and negative q already set up to be opposite coefficients. And so 3p and 2p will be 5p, and then 71 and 30 will be 101. So you can see here we're going to get a decimal for our answer. It's not the most beautiful thing in the world, but it's fine, you'll be okay. You can leave it as a fraction or you can do it as a decimal, because our decimal here is 20.2, which is a nice simple decimal to work with. So if I replace 3 times 20.2 plus q equals 71. 20.2 times 3 gives me 60.6 plus q equals 71. Subtract 71 minus 60.6 and you get 10.4, so q equals 10.4. So those are your 2 solutions. Okay? Now, for this next one, you have something with the same coefficient here. Our r has the same coefficient, but they're not opposite. We need one of them to be a negative. So I'm going to, again, multiply this whole thing by -1, and I'm going to get negative 8r minus 4s equals negative 12. Now this will cancel out, and I can combine these, which is negative 3s equals negative 3 and negative 12 is negative 15. Divide both sides by negative 3. We get s equals 5. I can plug that in above, and I get 8r plus 20 equals 12. Subtract 20 from both sides. We get 8r equals negative 8. R then equals negative 1. Okay? This last one is, notice we have different coefficients of the same sign here. So our x is not where it's at. For the second one, we have the same coefficient, but with the wrong sign. So again, I'm going to multiply this whole thing by -1, make this 2x plus 9y equals 3. Combine my like terms, and I'm going to get negative 5x equals negative 30. Divide both sides by negative 5, x equals 6, and then go and plug that back in for y. I'll let you do the rest of that. You can figure that out. Just make sure to show your work. All right, so that's it. Again, you have your code word. Make sure you have your volume on and you're listening. If you have any questions, you know how to reach me. Happy homeworking and see you tomorrow.